Have you ever heard the story behind this famous painting? Probably not, because I don't think it's famous at all. Well, let me tell you the story of this painting. A time long, long ago, I laid in bed. There I was, with my fingers fluttering on this box commonly known as an iPhone. A typical night of ruining my attention span through TikTok, but suddenly I came across something life-changing. Puff quilts. What was this enchanted collection of fabric, and why was I so drawn to it? As soon as I made the discovery of this majestic blanket, I knew I had to make one. My mind was blown. My first step in making this quilt was coming up with the design for it. So, I went to where all creative inspirations and important thoughts are born from. The Notes app. I then made some sketches of what I wanted the blanket to look like. Data collected, I proceeded to stalk Joann Fabric's entire online catalog to find some fabric that wouldn't explode my bank account. Luckily, their flannel fabric was on sale and I ended up buying this floral fabric, the star fabric, a grid fabric, and the super cute cherry cat fabric. I placed my order, definitely spent too much money, but then I got the text from my girl Joann that my package had arrived. I filmed myself opening my package, but there's really only one thing you as a viewer needs to take away from this footage, and that is this first sentence I said.
Hopefully it's really nice or else I'm gonna cry and die and scream and throw up.
And cry, die, scream, and throw up I did, because Joann Fabrics only sent me 3 out of the 5 items I ordered and canceled the rest of my order for no reason. Like, they had it in stock, but I just don't know what happened. And reordering the remaining fabric would result in another shipping cost. This was unacceptable, so I pulled up to rock the shit out of Joann Fabrics. Anyways, I ended up just going to pick up the rest of my order because it's really not that serious. Little did I know this would be my first and last solo trip to Joann Fabrics. Rest in peace. You will be missed. Okay, so here's my final haul of what I ended up getting. These 4 fabrics are going to make up each puff of the square. And I don't know what this is, but it might be a fun decoration to add at the end. And this milky velvet fabric is going to make up the backing. And this white bed sheet is going to be used as interfacing so I can stuff each puff. This is me filming a fun transition of me turning said white bed sheet into little squares. But I kind of forgot to finish the transition, so instead here's just me dancing around strangely with a bed sheet. Okay, I lost my mind trying to find this clip, but I finally found it. I knew I wasn't crazy. Maybe I am. And yeah, I started this project during Christmas time and didn't finish it until April, and I'm editing this in June because sometimes you get busy and lazy and maybe your sewing machine is in your basement, like mine, and it's freezing cold in there during the winter, so being down there for more than 5 minutes feels like you're doing the world's coldest polar plunge. Here I am ironing and cutting out the squares that'll make up my puffs. Some people make super small squares for their quilts, but I wasn't really a fan of that look, and something about it just seemed uncanny to me. So each square I'm making is 11 by 11 inches with 5 squares across for the width and 6 squares down for the length. Then right about here my camera fell over and sorry I couldn't save you, but it kind of made for a good transition. See, and then all the squares for the pink star fabric were finished. I bought 2 yards of each fabric because I was paranoid of running out, but I actually have a good amount left. Maybe I can make children's sleeper out of my scraps? Oh wait, never mind. I didn't know this was a thing, by the way. When I looked it up, I thought maybe the fabric would just be irritating to young skin since it's sensitive, but the regulations for children's sleeper are hardcore. It has to be flame resistant and be able to self-extinguish, which, I mean, makes sense because babies aren't gonna know how to stop, drop, and roll. And I guess no one is showing their kids Smokey the Bear these days, but I had no idea this was a federally regulated law. And I mean, if you think about it, shouldn't we have cool flame-resistant, self-extinguishing pajamas too? Because think about it, if you're a deep sleeper and your house catches on fire, you're actually done for, you're dying. That's one of my biggest fears, by the way. So we need to get flame-resistant pajamas for adults too. And teenagers, and for old people, because old people can't get out of bed either. And like, no offense, but it's true. And I'm not losing my grandma to some non-flame-resistant pajamas, so we better start producing these. This also marks the end of my red hair because this footage is so old, it is before my pre-Elmo era, and I recorded the outro and intro like 2 days ago. So if you thought my hair color was horrendous to look at in the beginning, then lucky for you, you don't have to anymore. Until you get to the end, but whatever. And if you did like the red hair, then thank you, but Sorry, it's gone now. I know a bit earlier we talked about me not liking the cold, and if you're one of those people, do not get colored hair. But it is so hard and cruel and torturous for me to take a cold shower because that is not fun. And what baffles me is some people do it willingly, and then they take it a step further and take ice baths, and then there are those people that take those extreme polar plunges. I don't care what the health benefits are, why are you doing that to yourself? I know it can help with circulation and with your mood and stuff, but to me it's not worth it. And I know factually speaking, you can't get hypothermia until at least 15 minutes of being in the water, but why are you risking that? I finished cutting all 30 squares, and let me tell you, my wrist has never been happier than at this moment. Then I arranged the squares row by row in the order that I wanted them to lay. I put each row into a different stack so I wouldn't mix them up or sew the wrong squares together. For the assembly, I started by sewing each square to the white square so it would have a backing. I sewed the sides and the top of the square shut, but left the bottom open so I could add stuffing into each pocket later. Then I clipped 2 squares right sides together and sewed it down to join them together. I repeated this until I had a fabric version of a chicken strip for the row. I then sewed each row individually before joining the rows together. Also, I know things got a bit violent earlier with Joann Fabrics for messing up my order, but I am sad about them closing. Where are you guys buying yarn from now? Because Big Twist carried me through nearly all of my crochet projects and now it's gone. I heard they destroyed all of their sewing patterns instead of donating them or giving them to a different store or just putting it on sale. Which when I first found out about that, I was livid. I was like, why? Girl, I would have taken them. I would have used them real good. But it's actually crazy because the publishers of the sewing patterns Simplicity and McCall's, they didn't want their sewing patterns to be discounted or sold for less than what they were worth, so they demanded that all of the patterns be destroyed and covered in liquid so they couldn't be used. I am so sick of late-stage capitalism, y'all. Get me out of here. Not even the dumpster divers could get to those sewing patterns. I know people think dumpster divers are repulsive too, but I have mad respect for them because if you're willing to risk getting disease, bed bugs, and potentially murdered for just going into an alleyway with a dumpster, you deserve whatever it is you're looking for. Once I had all my rows done, I started stuffing them ferociously like a turkey that's just met its doom and is being prepared for Thanksgiving dinner. But lucky for the turkey, I sewed the seam shut by clipping the next row down and sewing, so now at least the turkey can live on in taxidermy form. Sorry, I don't know where I'm going with this metaphor. It's kind of weird. Also, humble brag, but I made this cardigan that I'm wearing right now, so what y'all think? Does it look good? Is it ugly? I don't know, let me know, but it was made of all Big Twist yarn, so I know I said this earlier, but where am I supposed to get cheap yarn from now? I want to try bamboo yarn and mercerized cotton yarn and also linen yarn, so if any of you have tried it, let me know how you liked it, because I'm honestly done with acrylic. It just frays and splits every time I use it. At this point, sewing this was a beast, by the way, because the blanket no longer fit on the table. The next day when I went to work on my blanket, I encountered an obstacle. A very cute one, but still an obstacle nonetheless. Trying to remove her from the blanket was a mistake, as she was not a force to be reckoned with and fought back. I sat down with defeat as my furry opponent had gotten the best of me. Luckily, with the persuasion of treats, she decided to let me through. I then proceeded with the task at hand and finished stuffing and attaching all of my rows together. If you want to enrich your mind, feel free to count all of the cat settings in this video. I don't know if you noticed, but each cat is a different one too. The blanket was practically done at this point, and now I just need to add the backing. But just for a second, can we admire my work? Doesn't it look so cute? Like, the quilt is puffing. I honestly can't believe I made that, and I had no idea I possessed such sewing capabilities. Trigger warning, very bad dancing. Proceed with caution. The next day, I was frolicking around with glee, as I had been foolish enough to believe this would be the final day I would be working on this project, and I'm sorry you had to see that, by the way. All I had to do was attach the backing and then... What was that voice? Well, I still had some leftover fabric, and to tie the blanket all together, I wanted to add some cat ruffles onto the blanket because that fabric is so cute and it really is the star of the show here. This decision to add ruffles, however, prolonged this project by at least a month because it was getting colder and colder outside and I wanted to be in my basement to sew less and less. To begin the ruffles, I started by measuring each side of the blanket to see how much fabric I would need for the ruffles. I started cutting out long strips, but they were not quite long enough for the blanket. I didn't want there to be an exposed seam though, so instead I cut the fabric at an angle to sew them together because once the ruffle would form, it would hide the seam. The way that my nails have changed multiple times throughout this video shows just how long this project took, but the blanket is so cute it's worth it. I then clipped my two ruffles right sides together and sewed it down. Side note, does anyone else find the noise of the sewing machine extremely relaxing? It's gotta be one of the top 10 sounds to listen to. Like here, just listen. If you think I should make sewing machine ASMR, let me know. Because if that wasn't satisfying, I don't know what is. Just like that, my strips were aligned and I started sewing a hem onto the edges, so my ruffles wouldn't fray away once attached to the blanket. You could say I am afraid of that happening. I know, hilarious. Sorry if you think my jokes are so-so. Then I jacked up my stitch length and tension like I was a gym rat who was about to bench 500 pounds. As I sewed down the strip of fabric, the ruffles began to form. Usually I would sew this seam twice to reinforce it, but since I would be attaching it to the blanket, I didn't do that. You can also see the gameplay I was watching in this footage to keep myself entertained while sewing, which isn't an important detail, but I brought it up anyway. Here I am nearing the end of the ruffle, and this is what it looks like once completed. And here's what it looks like attached to my blanket. Very nice, very nice. Except for this top corner, but boom! Fixed that. Here's the quilt all ruffled and puffed. Now the blanket is essentially complete, but wait a minute. Oh my god, it's naked underneath! Now that simply won't do. To give my blanket some decency, I placed my backing right side on top of the blanket and started clipping it on top. When doing this, make sure to tuck the ruffles into the blanket, otherwise when you turn the blanket backside out, you'll have sewed them down and you won't be able to see them. While clipping, I realized that my pink minky backing was a bit too big for the blanket, so I folded the excess over and trimmed it off with scissors. I used random products around my room and the help of a feline acquaintance to keep the blanket held down and still while I cut. She was a very big help. I finished clipping everything together and it was time for the final sew. Meow! I did jam my sewing machine horribly and spent 2 hours trying to fix it during this part, but after that it was smooth sailing. I broke 2 different sewing needles while I was doing this project, which is unfortunate, but honestly with how thick the blanket is, I'm surprised it wasn't more. I had to take apart and reassemble my sewing machine so many times, but I'm basically a pro and a sewing machine mechanic now, so if you need any help, just call me and let me know. I'll come to your house and fix your sewing machine for you, but I will be charging $2,000. I continued sewing down the blanket and left a small hole open so I could use it as extra storage, or maybe as a piggy bank. But then I remembered I needed at least one blanket on my bed that wasn't 10 years old, so I used the hole to flip the blanket inside out instead. This looks so satisfying, by the way. I wish I could flip my brain inside out like this. I think it would be so rejuvenating and a necessary cleanse. Flipping the blanket was a tough workout because I had to pull it, punch it, shove it, toss it around, so I definitely worked up quite a sweat doing this. The blanket is a bit heavy, but I don't mind since weighted blankets are personally my favorite type of blanket to sleep with. I finished flipping the blanket and had a small celebration. And now I just gotta close this hole up, which should be pretty easy to do. I mean, I definitely know how to do that. I did not know how to close the gap without it looking strange, so I watched this 10 out of 10 tutorial on how to do the ladder stitch. But in case you decide to try it out, just know the name is misleading because it turns out the thread does not support human weight and you cannot use it as a real life ladder. So disappointing. But it does work very well for blankets. Now it was time for the final test. Would my blanket survive the washing machine? Did I properly secure every thread? Would it disintegrate within 30 seconds of being in the water? Well, actually, it turned out pretty good, I think. It may have shrunk a smidge, but that's my fault because I didn't pre-wash any of my fabric. To make the final reveal of my puff quilt more entertaining, I decided to edit it obnoxiously like how a teenage boy would edit his car. Let me know what you think. And now, all I had to do was test the blanket. The sight of it alone created a comfortable and welcoming environment. I gracefully hopped in my bed, one leg after another. Got my doom scrolling session on TikTok in. Pet this cat that was also enjoying the blanket. And pretended to sleep for the camera. As every good YouTuber does. Good night, everyone. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the credits if you want to see a fun fact. Please subscribe, by the way.